The Daily Derech. We are walking the path of holiness.
Hello, everybody. This is Rabbi Marcus Rubenstein. Welcome to the Daily Derech. Today is the 5th day after Shabbat Kodesh, the 23rd of Adar, 5786, corresponding in the secular calendar to Thursday, March 12th, 2026. We will read Parashat Vayakhel Pekudei this coming Shabbat, and we are 20 days from Pesach. Let's begin. We'll start with Me'am Loez on the Parsha. We're still on Parashat Vayakhel, and we've spoken about this word in previous episodes, this word Vayakhel, to gather together, and we've given different interpretations, and they're all wonderful. Remember that words can have many different interpretations and many different meanings within Judaism. So we're going to discuss another interpretation of the first word of the Parashat, Vayakhel, to gather together. And it's really important because, as I've said in previous episodes, this is a specific word that's only used a couple times within the Torah, and this is probably the most famous place. Vayakhel meaning to gather together, to come together as community, and Moses gathers the community together. Here, I think what's so important is that the rabbis point out that this word is specifically brought about Shabbat, right? That people should, that when Moses gathers the Jewish people together, in our Parsha, the next two verses are about observing Shabbat. And so the question comes, why does this specifically, what does Vayakhel, gathering together as a community, have to do with Shabbat? And the way the way the Me'am Loez answers this, through, of course, many midrashim about this in the rabbis, in the midrash and the Talmud, is about what Shabbat is really about. We've spoken previously that part of Shabbat should be about enjoyment, pleasure, having fun, relaxing as a person. But part of Shabbat also should be for God, right? For readjusting one's values, for reconnecting to our spirituality, to God, to our eternal values. And one way that this happens is through the teaching of Torah. One of the important parts about Shabbat is that the community comes together on Shabbat to learn Torah, and not just Torah that is nice, inspiring, meaningful. That's wonderful, but also instructive Torah that actually teaches us how to practice Judaism. That's really important, and the rabbis have always used the synagogue as a place after Shabbat really to come together and actually instruct the community in what they need to know in order to fulfill their religious rituals. And the reason is because most people are working all week. They're very busy with all of the things they need to do. They might not have as much time to learn Torah, which of course is why we bring this podcast to you, but they should have more time on Shabbat because of course they should be resting on Shabbat and not working. So one of the rituals that was created that the Me'am Loez talks about in this parsha is the idea that in many synagogues, right after Shabbat morning services, there's lunch, Kiddush lunch. Thank God we have that. And right after that, though, there's oftentimes some time that, especially in the summertime, when we have to wait for it to be the appropriate time to daven Shabbat mincha services or Shabbat afternoon prayers, sometimes up to an hour or two. And what the Me'am Loez says is the practice of many synagogues in the Me'am Loez's time was for people to come together right after the meal that the rabbi would teach. The rabbi would teach Torah until Shabbat Mincha happened. It was time for the Shabbat afternoon prayer. Now, as a working professional rabbi in real communal life, that sounds real tiring. I think I might fall asleep through the class. But regardless, and especially because back then, the rabbis who served congregations were not the ones standing up on the bima the whole time conducting the service like they are now. Rather, that was done by a shliach tzibur or a chazan. I think the ideal and the beauty behind this idea is really important, that the community comes together once a week during Shabbat to learn the laws and learn the practices, learn the Torah that the community needs to learn at that particular moment to continue serving Hashem. And that happens all together. That doesn't happen just individually, but that happens as the community comes together to hear that instruction. And that individuals within the community actually make this a priority, saying, I need to hear what are the communal needs right now. Every week I need to have my ear open to what needs to be learned, how we need to improve, how we need to grow. That's really, really important. And I think that's like a wonderful, beautiful custom. And I sort of hope we can do that more often. That synagogue really can be a place where if you do go every week, you learn what you need to know and need to practice, and that we can have this kind of communal pact that we're all going to continue learning together. And of course, I think in a modern perspective, it's not just what the rabbi has to teach or what the Torah has to tell us, but also reconnecting to community, right? That coming to on Shabbat is not just about fulfilling one's religious obligations, or even just learning Torah, but it's connecting to each other. It's hearing what's going on in each other's life and coming to services in order to say, I need to stay connected to my community members in order to help them, in order to be there, in order to be an actual member in community. That means I have to actually show up and not plan a meal during that time or not plan something else during that time, but actually make time in my schedule to be present and be there. All right, my friends, let's turn to the Mishnah Torah. We're going to learn the 19th halacha of the second chapter of the Mishnah Torah on Chametz uMatzah, continuing our study of the laws of Pesach to prepare for the Pesach holiday. We're going to talk particularly about an incident of what happens if you're leaving before Pesach on a trip. In this case, do you have to prepare before you leave for the trip for Pesach? Do you have to search your house for Chametz and clean it out and everything and prepare everything like this? And this is a really live question because I think a lot of people in some ways try to avoid Pesach or avoid cleaning and searching their house and doing all this work by leaving before Pesach begins and going somewhere else for Pesach. So this is a very, very live and important question that I think we need to talk about. Now, the way the Mishnah Torah talks about this, I think, is in some ways outdated to the way we travel, so we're going to have to make some adjustments. But at least the way the Mishnah Torah talks about it is the one who sets out to sea or leaves in a caravan within 30 days of Pesach, are they obligated to search for chametz, right? So the situation, you're going on this sea voyage or this trip, and remember, my body's was writing, in early medieval times. So this was dangerous to go out on a sea voyage. You might not get back when you want to. The seas might be bad, or you might get delayed in some way. Who knows? Or in a caravan, you might be robbed. It's dangerous to travel. And so people weren't exactly sure when they were going to come back. They might have a plan of when they were going to come back, but it might be a couple days later, a couple days back, or even weeks later. Travel was very unpredictable in this way. And so the ruling the Mishnah Torah says is that 30 days, within 30 days of Pesach, if you're leaving on a trip, either on a sea voyage or in a caravan like this, that you need to actually check for chametz before, and you need to search the house for chametz and prepare the house for Pesach before, and you're actually supposed to search and everything like this. And that if it's before 30 days from Pesach, then we don't necessarily have to search, as long as, of course, you're planning on getting back to your house before the 14th of Adar. I'm sorry, the 14th of Nisan. Very important. But nowadays, of course, we know that travel is a little different, right? We know certainly more specifically when we're going to get back and when schedules happen. Now, obviously, anyone who's flew on a plane lately knows that you can be delayed a couple of hours or a couple of days even, and God forbid something can happen. So the question is still live, but maybe not as live as it used to be back in the day. And again, I think it's important to also understand that Maimonides' ruling also only applies in the case when you're leaving nobody else at home. So if let's say you're leaving on a business trip, but your wife is staying at home, or your partner is staying at home, or even your child is staying at home who could do the search and who can prepare the house for Pesach, or you've hired someone to do that search for you, then of course these laws are not in effect anymore. But this is, if you are the only person who can do this search and who can prepare the house for Pesach, then you have to do this. But I think this still applies very much so. Often something that happens is people think, well, I'll just go away for the first couple days of Pesach maybe, and then I'll come home in the middle of Pesach, and it'll be okay. I don't really have to search for the house for Pesach. And the answer is that that's actually the wrong practice against the Jewish law. I mean, people don't intend to do wrong here, but it is technically wrong. If you are home for any amount of the 7 days of Pesach, whatever it is if you're in Galiot, it might be an extra day, whatever it is, then you need to, of course, you need to actually prepare your house for Pesach, even if you're there just for a day. But if you're really not returning to your house, so if you're going on a Pesach vacation for all of the days of Pesach and you won't be home for any amount of Pesach, yes, it is true. All you do is sell your chametz and or obviously get rid of it. But you don't necessarily need to search and clean the house and everything like that. And your house really becomes a storehouse for the chametz on Pesach. So that's actually a very much okay thing to do. But I think it's important to understand if your schedule is, you're not so clear and you're afraid you're not going to get home before Pesach, then you really should prepare your house in advance and make sure that everything is okay in the house, to make sure that everything is ready for Pesach. And we should take it that seriously. And it really depends on how your life is going. If obviously you have a question about this, you should bring it to your local rabbi and discuss, should I prepare Pesach beforehand? Should I not? Should I wait? Whatever your concern may be. Let's now finish today's podcast with Menorat HaMaor. We're going to continue learning the Menorat HaMaor on the topic of preparing for Pesach, obviously, because Pesach is coming up. And these midrashim that we're going to be learning, these ethical concepts and ideas and stories, are all going to be really to prepare us for Pesach. Obviously, they have meaning beyond Pesach, certainly theological meaning, but important for Pesach. We're going to move on to Jacob, actually, and when Jacob actually descended to Egypt. And of course, when did Jacob, the grandson of Abraham, go down to Egypt? Does anyone, when was this? It was particularly when Jacob went down because of famine, right? The idea that there was famine in the land, and Jacob and his family had to go down to Egypt to get food and everything like this. And this, of course, was in the time of Joseph, when Joseph was the minister, and Egypt had all the food. And according to our midrash, Jacob recognized that this was the beginning of the exile that was prophesied to his grandfather Abraham in the Brit Bein HaBeitarim, in the covenant between the parts that we've been talking about in previous episodes, that the Jewish people are going to suffer exile and darkness. And I think Jacob really saw that it's really beginning, that this is real, and this is going to be a very hard time for the Jewish people. And I think what was wonderful about this, and what's wonderful about this midrash of what Jacob's going to do, is that Jacob doesn't say, well, we have to stop this. This hard time has to stop. We can't accept this. He actually does say, okay, they're going to be hard times. We're going to suffer. There's going to be darkness. And according to the midrash, what he does is he offers shlamim. He offers peace offerings in Beersheba at the time, to harmonize all of the attributes of God, right? We believe in Judaism that God has many attributes. God has the attributes of strict justice. Sometimes when God is punishing us or holding us to account, we call that gevurah. And there's sometimes when God is full of grace and God forgives us, and God is full of chesed and loving kindness towards us. And let's be honest, it's always a balance all the time, just like any good leadership is sometimes you have to be really strict, and sometimes you can be a little looser and filled with more grace, and that needs to be a balance. So what Jacob does at this time is, I feel gevurah right now. I feel this strict justice, that we're going to begin to be punished and we're going to begin to face darkness. And what he supposedly does is he offers shlamim, peace offerings, saying, and what shalem means, and this is so important in Judaism, shalem doesn't just mean peace offerings or wholeness or well-being, but really has the idea of shalem in it, or shlemut, of wholeness, that it should be balanced, it should be whole. That if the gevurah comes into this world, if God has to be strict with us, may it be also balanced with compassion. May it be in a balanced way, in a way that the people can take and deal with. So Jacob really does pray for the people that if we're going to go through this darkness, may this be in a balanced way. And the way that God responds is so beautiful. He says to Jacob, supposedly in Genesis 46:4, he says, I myself will go down to Egypt, which according to the Menorat HaMaor and according to the midrash is the idea that God will go down in this darkness, that the chesed, that even if we experience gevurah, even if we experience darkness and suffering in our lives that we have to go through, sometimes we have to go through that, we can be assured that God's Shekhinah, that God's indwelling divine presence will go with us into that exile, into that dark place, and will be with us, and that God's presence really was with us even in Egypt, even when we were facing darkness, even when we were facing servitude. And that should help us. That should give us that chesed and that grace, even at that moment. And sometimes the ruling might not actually change. We might face real darkness and we really might suffer and it might be really difficult. But it should be somewhat calming and relieving to know that even in that darkness, even in that pain and suffering we feel, that God is going to feel that with us, that God is going to be with us, that God's presence is with us. It could easily mean that if we face darkness at that moment, that means that God is not going to be with us. But that's never the case. Even if we feel separation from God because of our transgressions and our sins and the darkness and the suffering and the narrowness that we're in, we should know and we should understand that God's presence is not only with us, but feeling what we're feeling, empathizing with what we're going through. God never separates from us. And that's so important to remember as we go through dark times and suffering within our own personal lives and also within, of course, the communal lives of the Jewish people. Well, that's it for today, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Daily Derech. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to email me anytime at rmr@templeofaaron.org. Thank you so much for listening. There are so many people to thank, and you can look in the show notes for that. And also, if you want to know and see any of these texts in the original, we actually have that too. You can actually find that in our episode description. So look in each of the episode descriptions and you'll find that information right there. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.